podcast. Arnie, you're on the podcast. Look, look, lolook.
Well, there
So
we go.
Arnie, David and
Extra
I have had a
special
great,
guest.
yeah, we had a special guest, not Arnie. We had Chris. I'm not trying to pronounce his last name. You do it.
Chris Braitch.
Braitch. So great story. If I say great story, sad story, but a typical story, right? From childhood trauma, addiction. Very very typical. If I say typical, pathway. And what he said was all triggered by him being in boarding school. So he does a lot of work now with boarding school students, and if I say evangelizing for or against trauma for boarding school students. So really interesting, an area I never looked into, to be honest. And he turned from sales, so similar to myself, into coaching and helping others, which is great story. That's what we want to hear. David, what did you take from it?
Well, yeah, just a very powerful episode. And, I have to confess that I'm probably one of those people that, had the opinion of, oh, well, if, you went to boarding school, then you had an easy start in life. And yeah, it's just, another example of, yeah, the grass isn't always greener on the other side, or the grass is rarely greener on the other side. But yeah, powerful episode. Enjoy.
Yeah, great.
Welcome to the Man Up, Man Down podcast, presented by Volker Beluda and David Pawsey. We discuss the pressures and challenges faced by men approaching middle age that we're often too embarrassed to speak about with our friends. You can find us online at www.manupdown.com. Enjoy the show and don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review.
So welcome to another episode of Man Up, Man Down. Today we welcome Chris Braitch. Chris is a father of three whose mission it is to move himself and the world around him towards connection and compassion. He works as an emotional health coach, leadership coach with Compassionate Leaders Global, and as the founding director of Seen and Heard, a not-for-profit offering well-being support to past and present pupils of the private school system, many of whom have experienced institutional abuse and neglect. After 2 decades in sales, marketing and management for global consumer goods companies, Chris's life was upended by unresolved childhood trauma, the grief of losing his young son and mother, and addiction, leading to a breakdown in 2021. Through coaching, men's groups, emotional freedom technique, and a spiritual awakening, he's rebuilt his life. Now addiction-free, he has found his purpose, transformed his parenting, and is committed to serving others with compassion and authenticity. Well, thanks for sharing all that, Chris. Sorry, I got a bit tongue-tied in the middle. But yeah, I mean, I was watching one of your YouTube videos earlier, and in it you sort of talked about the fact that there's sort of a viewpoint that if you've been to private school, you've had a privileged upbringing, but often it can sort of be, well, a double-edged sword, in some cases a single-edged sword. But one of the things that you mentioned is that people that have been to boarding school are 2 to 3 times more likely to develop addictions. So yeah, I mean, a lot to sort of go through there. But welcome to the podcast and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for having me on. Really appreciate it. It's a great podcast. I've seen a number of episodes in the past, and yeah, it's good to be here. And your intro was appreciated. I think we tend to refer to a lot of the sort of the myth of privilege, and it is particularly the era that I went through, the boarding school system in the 80s, and those who went through, from the 50s, 60s until probably about 5-10 years ago, started to get better, improve. It's not perfect, not fixed and all that, but it's better. But people who went through in that sort of 60-year period, it was really really challenging. Obviously you're away from home, and even in the day school sector, the schools were, geared up really just for sort of academics. sport, and there wasn't a lot of room for pastoral care, well-being, welfare. It was sadly found during the independent inquiry into child sex abuse 3 years ago to be called out as a breeding ground for paedophiles and abuse, sexual abuse. And it was, a pretty rough experience at times, and you're doing that away from your family as well, so you haven't got that support structure. But in this society, it's seen very much as a privilege, as a sort of a fast start in life, and all these great connections and yeah, success, if you like. So we work a lot to kind of just not to blow that apart, but just say, look, there is another side to it. Even if no abuse occurred, you're growing up away from your caregivers in a peer attached environment, often where there'll be a number of well-meaning staff, and there'll be a number of staff who shouldn't be anywhere near children. Um, and you can't go home. You can't get away from it. So we do a lot of work with people who've been through that system.
So what, maybe I'm a bit naive, but maybe I'm helping the listeners here as well. But what is it you're actually doing? I think it would be good to hear from you, because there's some, looking at your website, I say we're almost competitors, right? In a similar space. You do leadership coaching, you do a bit of sales consulting as well with Growth Wave. And
Less of it now, but yeah,
yeah. And then where does this come in with the addiction, and what's your personal story behind it? I think that's probably what would be good to dive into a little bit.
yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, my personal story, it was I was sort of unpacking some stuff in my weekly therapy, my weekly coaching the other day, and also speaking with an expert on our podcast about postnatal depression as well. And that the journey into life and to my family, it was working class family, so we're not a boarding school private class family. But mum was emotionally unwell for most of her life. She was an alcoholic. Didn't really want to have kids. Had a tough pregnancy, postnatal depression, etc. So she was then either emotionally absent or physically absent, and a lot in my early years. And then Dad was, he's a good man, a lovely man, but he was a workaholic, so he was out working all the time, and so I was sort of raised by collection of kind of some grandparents, relatives, hired help, that sort of stuff, and then boarding school at 7. So I went to boarding school at 7, so very young, and I was pretty emotionally shut down by the time I went to boarding school. And anyone who knows it at all, if you're being emotionally shut down in a boarding school is probably better than being emotionally attached or attuned in a boarding school, because then that's got a break. I didn't really have anything to break, but it doubles down on it as a way of being a kind of a very dissociated, detached, sort of stiff upper lip existence. So that for me manifested. I was at boarding school till sort of 13, 14. When I came home to a day school, and very sadly, my mum died within a year of a brain tumor. And so, out the frying pan into the fire, and insert, cliched troubled teens after that with booze, drugs, and yeah, just lost really. So it wasn't an easy start. Not that anyone's start is easy, but I came out into my 20s in London, starting to try and find a career. Wasn't doing anything that I loved. I just fell into stuff that sort of paid money. As a fully fledged alcoholic, gambler, porn addiction, sex addiction, heavy smoker, very overweight, junk food, all the rest of it. So I had 6 or 7 sort of addictions that I've worked with for the last 25 years. And just through workaholism on top of all the others. So I'm very I was a bit of a career sort of corporate climber, and I realized, reflecting back, that my career was spent trying to get high enough to find a place of safety where I couldn't get bullied anymore. I thought if I got to the top, I would be safe. But when I had my breakdown 4 or 5 years ago, I'd reached pretty much the top, and I wasn't feeling any better. I wasn't any safer. I was drinking more, and the whole house of cards came down. So
Right.
yeah, thank you for asking. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, because yeah, I mean, it's very common, right? You're trying to get more and more, but you never get satisfied, right?
Yeah, Gabor Mate calls them the hungry ghosts. Yeah, the
Yeah.
hungry ghosts of addiction. As soon as I heard that, I thought, God, that's exactly. I mean, by the end of it, by late 30s, early 40s, I was, it wasn't just like a few drinks. I had to, stacking prescription pills on top of booze, on top of, then it had to be a casino, and then it had to be a lap dancing club, and then it was just like did it. I couldn't get there. I couldn't
Hard.
get to the point that I felt all right anymore. And so when you run out of options, enters, as they call it, best and banded colks, brilliant, but the body keeps the score. Eventually,
Yeah.
your body will pull the plug on you, and for me, I got COVID really badly, and then had a full on emotional breakdown 5
Right.
years ago.
And but you said earlier you have 3 kids as well.
Yeah, so I've got 2 amazing daughters who are nearly 14, and my son Ben, who died 10 years ago. He had a very rare genetic condition, and was very healthy for the first sort of 6 months of life, and then went downhill after that. And that just, tore the family apart. I ended up, separating and then divorcing from the mother of my ex-wife, the mother of my children. Um, and yeah, at the time, dealing with newborn twins, a severely, critically ill my son, um, trying to just keep working, keep the family going. And of course, at that point, I didn't know it. Now looking back, I can see it, but my body started to fall apart at that point. So, all the autoimmune conditions started kicking in, things like Crohn's disease, rheumatoid arthritis, skin cancer, all sorts of stuff. And basically, I was falling apart. My body was falling apart from unresolved trauma. And but yeah, I still say I have 3 children, because Ben will, never leave me. He's with me every day, and a lot of emotional healing work on that. But I've very integrated with it now. Yeah.
So the last question, David, and that you see David getting ready. So what changed then? What was the turning point? Because in the bio there was spiritual awakening, and what you're doing now is completely different, right?
Yeah,
What
for sure. I mean,
what was the trigger? I
it's
mean, you
so
mentioned COVID as well, but
yeah, I got, so got sick with COVID, and had a full on what's called depersonalization, derealization experience, where you dissociate so much that you effectively lose. Well, I lost space, time, physical presence, everything. I was sort of a gibbering wreck for a bit, and coming through that, I don't know how, but I must have Googled something, but the universe brought me a coach who had been through similar experiences to me, come through. He'd done a lot of stuff online, a guy called Piers Cross, amazing man. Done a lot of stuff about boarding school trauma, about trauma healing. And, he'd walked my path. He was just a little bit further ahead on it. And, I credit him for saving my life, really. So good, started with that. And he brought me emotional freedom technique, which for anyone who doesn't know is sometimes called EFT, or tapping a series of acupressure points at the same time as you can process any physical, emotional challenges that are coming up for you. And it was life changing, because I think most people walking around are basically a floating head. They're just a left brain. There's no emotional depth connection going on. We've had to shut all that off, because it's sort of not required in the modern age. And very dissociated from our bodies. And so they're then was a long healing process of somatic healing work, which is using the body to help heal, because the trauma is held in the body. The spiritual awakening stuff it's just come as a result of doing a lot of deep work, a lot of men's groups, men's work, all types of different therapies. It was some really interesting retreats, some stuff I never thought I'd be doing. It feels now that I've recovered enough of my original self to have something to offer, had to have a gift to share, and that's why the work's changed. It. I just thought I have to do what my coach does, because if I can reach someone like he reached me, then I've got to pay that forward. And all the not-for-profits that have set up off the back of that, the compassionate leaders that you mentioned, that's all come from that one good coach at the right time.
I want, so sort of going back to the whole sort of boarding school aspect. I mean, did it almost take therapy and coaching to sort of realize that other people had gone through similar experiences as a boarding school? I mean, I don't know if you've ever listened to the Adam Buxton podcast, but that's sort of something that he references. And it's quite interesting that there is almost like a network, and and there's obviously this perception of the old boys club through sort of through boarding schools, but it almost seems like there's sort of this other network that you describe. I mean, sort of, when did you when did you kind of realize that? Because I know with a lot of forms of trauma, there is that thing of, oh well, it's just me, it's just the way, it doesn't happen to other people, it's happened to me, and it's the way that I've reacted to that, as opposed to the thing that you were subjected to. So yeah, my question is sort of, where did you uncover that network, or have that realization that there was a need for what you've created?
Thank you, David. Yeah, great question. You're spot on there. It's it's not what happens to you, it's what you make it mean. It is the classic thing in trauma. So there's no trauma top trumps, and I see that every day. People say, "Oh, well, I was only physically assaulted at school. I wasn't sexually abused." So what kind of, and the implication there is, so what have I got to moan about? And it's like, well, hang on a minute, no. You were a small child in a captive environment, subjected to physical torture, in the name of discipline? Question mark. So yeah, we have to. I think that's something that I try and advocate for, is to not go into that sort of trauma top trumps. But for me, I'd been in talk therapy for 20 years. At the point I had my breakdown, I first went into it at university, counselling, with a drink problem and paranoia, and it never once came up. So I must have had 10 therapists, counsellors during that 20-year period. I would go in for a bit when my son died, when my marriage was on the rocks, when I lost a job, whatever. So I go in for a band-aid, a sticky plaster. But it was a sticky plaster on a gunshot wound. I had complex post-traumatic stress. So there was no, it would patch me up. I feel better for talking, but unless you move this stuff in the body and the subconscious, it will keep coming back. It will keep coming back. You'll have a lovely language around what's going on in your head. You'll be able to articulate that it was issues with mum, and it was when you were bullied at school, and but you won't connect to it. And you won't move it until you get it moving in the body and the subconscious. So yeah, 20 odd years, not a single therapist or counselor ever asked me, where did you grow up? What was your early years like? Which is remarkable.
Wow, I was going to say, isn't that kind of the
kind of the jaw?
Yeah, the first question. Well, tell me about your childhood.
Tell me about you. Yeah. What's crazy though is if so in boarding school syndrome language, what a way that a young person can deal with growing up in an institution is to build a strategic survival personality pretty quickly. So you tuck into shadow everything that's not welcome, which is most stuff. You just got to keep on a middle ground, and don't be too excited, don't be too sad, just stiff upper lip it all the way through. Everything else is put into shadow. And so that strategic survival personality is incredibly good at deflecting anything real that's coming your way. You only need to see the politicians that have been through the system to know that they're like Teflon to people challenging them, people saying they've done something wrong. They'll never admit it. Boris and is the king of the exporters, if you like. And I was like that. So my therapist couldn't get anywhere near the good stuff because I would be maneuvering all the time. And I would always I'd be turning up with, my son has died. Yeah. So they're going to work on the grief. And then I'd be gone before they did the backstory. I'd have been patched up enough to be operational again. And then I'd be straight out the door because ultimately I wasn't ready to go through the big stuff that was underneath it. It was just whack-a-mole with the symptoms.
Hello folks, it's Volker here. I hope you enjoy this week's episode. As you know, I coach executives, whether that is for leadership skills, or sales leadership skills, or working as a therapist too. There are few ways I can help you to get unstuck, improve your work-life balance, or become a better version of yourself. So you will be more productive and have more time for your family. Whatever it is, you can join my client list of people from General Electric, Pepsi, DHL, Boots, and many others. Book a free exploratory call via my website, www.obnat.us. That's obnat.us. Now back to the show.
So my next question, you sort of mentioned about, all these retreats. I mean, could you sort of talk a bit more through sort of your recovery journey? I mean, you talked about men's groups and and it is one of those things that you sort of dip your toe in. I mean, obviously you'd been doing therapy, so you obviously were kind of, I guess, open to those sort of things, but sort of where did your as Volker said about your awakening, can you talk more about sort of the retreats and the experiences and what brought that out?
Yeah, thanks, David. I will. I just wanted to. I just realised I didn't really fully answer your last question.
Sorry. Carry on.
Yeah, the board. Well, I get sidetracked. It's part of the thing, but the boarding school system. So it wasn't there at all until I had the breakdown. And what I found out through my work, the emotional coaching, emotional health coaching, or the Seen and Heard, the not-for-profit, is it's the same for all people who've been through that boarding school system. It's a non-issue until it's everything. It's like it's typically when your kids reach the same age as you were when you were sent away. Because if you think of that subconsciously, you're looking at a small, fragile human that needs a lot of you, and the inner child, the part that's the subconscious part, goes, well, hang on a minute, I was in an institution being kicked up and down at this age, and look at this small person, he can't kind of put a bit of toast on. So that's a big one. Or there's a relationship breakdown, physical, emotional health problem, or the other big one is the person's parents die and there's nobody left to protect. So if there was abuse, it can come out without the parents feeling that shame. And often with particularly the sort of boarding and independent schools that, the expensive ones, if you like, the child internalizes the cost to their parents. And so therefore they carry that sort of sense of shame their whole life, that if they were to speak out against this experience, it would be a great dishonor of the sacrifice of the family financially, etc. So no one mentions it. It just gets buried until it's right there and you can't get past it. So that for me was at my break term. But that sort of just covers off the boarding schooly bit. But with the spiritual the journey, I think I've come to believe in synchronicity. The kind of the universe moves in interesting ways, and to find the coach that I did, who was this boarding school specialist, this expert, and then at the early days of that relationship, I was making good progress, but he then decided to do a documentary about boarding school syndrome and our wounded leaders. So these are the leaders at, the Donald Trumps, the Boris Johnsons, the David Camerons, the Putins, who'd been through the system out in the world. And the film's called Boarding on Insanity. It's a great film. And he said, look, we're going to film a retreat for this film. And, would you be a participant in this healing retreat, this 3-day retreat called Coming Home that was held in Glastonbury? 5 men, 5 women. The filmmaker Piers Cross, my coach, was a participant along with me and others, and it was incredible. It was a lot of, for anyone who sort of knows their therapy stuff, it was a lot of work with the inner child. So you have to go back to the 7-year-old who walked through the door of this institution and had to make a survival decision. And I've done a lot of podcasts now with people who went into care homes, state care system. They had the same thing. The only difference between our experiences was we were told how lucky we were to be there. They weren't, for obvious reasons. And so this retreat was incredible. There was something called family constellations, where you people are become members of your family, so you can actually speak to mum and dad. You can give things back that were given to you without your permission, which is, for most of us, is the healing journey, is handing all those shoulds back. Because anytime you say to yourself, I should be doing that, that's not your voice. That's something someone gave you without your permission that you've been carrying for a long time. So you can just go and hand it back. It was amazing. 3 days of that. A lot of, they say you can only heal relational trauma in relationship. And so by connecting with these other people that I'd had nothing to do with since I left school, on a deep, deep level, just, brought something out. And I did that retreat, which was fantastic. I did the Mankind Project, New Warrior Training Adventure, which is a weekend men's retreat, which for me just got me trusting men again, because for most of my life, men were drinking buddies or adversaries, people to be maneuvered around or climbed over, or so it was very staggy, very competitive, or they were like your mates who you had banter and drinking with. I didn't have a connected, intimate male friendship my entire adult life until now. So the men's work started to unlock these guys who were like, just had a different energy. The older men had that father energy that I was craving, or the grandfather energy. So I ended up with mentors, that sort of father age, grandfather age, younger men that you were then supporting. So that was life changing. And then it's been, fast track of kind of sort of spiritual awakening through meditation, a lot of meditation, yoga to get back in touch with my body, and loads and loads of emotional freedom technique. Having done all sorts of strange things like witness my own death, and knowing when and where, which was a great one for me, because I was like, right, I know how the story ends. It's only now, the only question mark is what I do between now and then. It released the fear of what came next. That was quite a landmark. And some of the times, within emotional freedom technique, you go back and you rescue younger parts of you that were left behind in trauma moments. Because trauma, when you freeze, an imprint is taken and you stay there until you go and get them back. And we've been doing it for tens of thousands of years. It's called soul retrieval. It depends what kind of indigenous culture you go to, but they all did it in some way or another. You go back, you rescue the younger part, you bring them home, you put them into an inner structure so that they can then bring a gift to you. and you carry on with your life a little bit wholer than you were before. So, yeah, that's kind of hopefully answers a bit of the question, but I've thrown the kitchen sink at it for 5 years, and it's still happening. I'm unraveling all day, every day, really.
So I just let Volker get a question in a moment, but just something I wanted to come back
Yes.
to. That you
It's good. I'm observing. I find it highly fascinating. Don't even have any questions. I was just like,
But
wow.
you mentioned about yeah, you know, this thing of your parents have paid for it, so you know there's that sort of guilt attached. So often it's when the parents have passed, and you know, sort of so often, you know, you hear it as a middle class aspiration. Oh, you know, I'd love to afford to, you know, send my children to private school. I mean, so where if I didn't know what you did and we were sat in the pub or going for a walk in the fresh air, sorry, and yeah, and I said, oh, you know, I'm thinking of sending my children to private school because, you know, I hear that it will provide all these opportunities. What would you say?
That's a great question. I mean, we've just finished at Seen and Heard. We just finished an article called "Is Boarding School Right for My Child?" And it took months and months and months, 30 plus experts to unpack the complexity of that decision, because I truly believe that parents are trying to do the best for their kids, but they are making that decision in a vacuum of society, if you like, you know, of aspirations and, you know, intergenerational stuff, you know, that's come down the line from their parents and, you know, all this. I feel for it. You know, it's a tough call. So I would always say, you know, to anyone who's asking that question is twofold. You know, tell me about your young person, because if they are highly connected, highly sensitive, unless the school is, and there are many good independent day schools that are doing very, very progressive work. So I want to say that straight off the bat. Then they're more recent now. They're not the old ones and the big names, but you know, they're doing incredible work. And actually, if you've got special educational needs or highly sensitive, highly creative, whatever, there are some independent schools which will do you know, a stand-up job, do a great job. But ultimately, what is the young person? What are they into? What do they like? If they have a very strong connection to their parents and it's boarding school you're talking about, doesn't matter how benign the school is, you are going to break that attachment. So be ready that when that attachment breaks, you leave the door open for them to come home. And that's what did the damage for so many generations, is when a child would contact home, often only through a letter, because it was all that was allowed, and they were screened like they are in prison. Those letters home, if they said, I hate it, I'm being bullied, I'm sad, the parents would call the school would say, hey, this is all part of the process. This is homesickness. It'll settle down. And what that really means is the child effectively just dissociates and puts that part of themselves away, and then becomes this kind of strategic survival personality, or a bit of a zombie, really, to go through the experience. So is for parents to go in eyes wide open to what is going to happen to a young person. Even if they say they want to go, you can't really, until 14, 15, from a developmental psychology perspective, understand the ramifications of what that actually means to say, you know, you've watched Harry Potter, Hogwarts looks epic, I want to go to boarding school, I want to go. Parent goes, well, I want to make my child happy because I'm a good parent, I've got enough money, etc. The child doesn't know what they're walking into. They don't know what's going to happen psychologically. And so leave the door open, understand the process. And the second thing then is the school really matters. So if you're going to do it, pick a school that puts well-being and welfare at the heart of what they do. And that's not just what they say on the prospectus, which most of them now say, because Ofsted are checking it, or Independent Schools Inspectorate are checking it, but actually go and find out, if my son or daughter is unhappy, what's the process? What well-being initiatives you got in place? You know, check it out, because there are some good ones out there, and there are some that are, you know, well-being is like a checkbox exercise for the marketing prospectus, and they are deeply unsafe places. So yeah, I think that would be my advice would be really think about, and also you think about your family situation. So another big reason kids go off to let's say a boarding school is because divorce, death, something's going on in the family home, military family moving around all over the place, mercantile family, moving around with the company. It's seen as a stability. But one thing we know is that children have been carried with their family units for 200,000 years into all sorts of epic kind of journeys, escaping ice ages, volcanoes. We're designed to stay with our family unit. We can survive anything if the family unit is there with us. So it's seen as this kind of way of creating stability. But once you break that interdependence and you focus on independence, the child loses that connective side. They have to put that into shadow. So yeah, I think it's just about parents getting psycho education, understand the full thing, full process, leave the door open in case the young person doesn't like it, just bring them home straight away. That's not failure. And then just look at society as well. I mean, for me, EQ, emotional intelligence, outranks IQ on a factor of 2 to 1 for any sort of leadership success, or longevity in a career. We do that in our leadership training program. So emotional intelligence is king. So if you've got a school that is just drilling academics or sporting success or music success, you are missing what is actually going to bring a long, happy, fulfilling life to the young person. So a lot of that private school sector is heated up to sort of be a sausage factory of success, but success has changed now. AI is changing the game. 60-70% of the jobs that our kids will do don't exist yet. So we have to give kids this emotional intelligence, creativity. We don't need to be drilling them for 50 hours, 60 hours a week for academics anymore. We just don't need to do it. So
Interesting. To be honest, I never thought about that. Nor have I been in a situation where I went to boarding school or had money to send my kids to boarding school. To be honest, but I guess it's like with any attachment, right? Attachment theory, where you abandon the child, right? Or the child might feel abandoned. And as we know from therapy, right? It doesn't need to be a big thing, right? Even if the child is, if I say 90% happy, there might be 10% unhappiness. It still sets a motion, to go off rail or whatever. So I wasn't aware of the facts in terms of addiction, etc. So it's really interesting. I guess you don't have anything else to do either, right? You don't have. I mean, what do you do after school? I don't know. I mean, you're not at home. You know what I mean? You don't get a home cooked meal. You don't have the family that is surrounding you and converses with you, right? So you might as well get drunk and take drugs and everything else, right? I mean,
yeah, for sure. I think I'm not under any misillusion or disillusion, whatever you call it, that people's home lives are all wonderful. That's just not the case. I mean, we work with people from right across the. Someone's furry friend is getting in on the conversation like that. So yeah, that home lives aren't always safe or good or okay. We know that, and that's very sad. The reality is about, if you come home, let's say you go to a school and you have a tough day and you're bullied. You come home, maybe your parents aren't the most attuned parents in the world, right? Maybe they're not. But maybe you can go into your room and close the door. Or maybe you can go into the toilet and close the door. But most of us who came through the boarding school system, I mean, they didn't have doors on the toilets. You bathed in front of a room of 20 other boys and 3 matrons. There was no safety, there was no privacy. So the human nervous system is designed to operate in stress, in fight flight, for about 15, 20 minutes tops. If you get into an environment where you constantly have to be on guard to keep people on side around you, to keep yourself safe physically, emotionally, etc., if you're always on, you get stuck in this hypervigilance. Now, what's supposed to happen then is you're supposed to, in caveman terms, go back to the cave, roll the stone across, let the nervous system settle, and then stress plus rest equals growth. But if you're in an environment where even when you try and sleep, you're in a dorm, it's noisy, people are whacking you in the head with a pillow while you're asleep because it's a laugh, older pupils might be in and out of the place doing God knows what. If you're in that sort of environment, you're always on. There is no safety, and therefore almost every ex-boarder that I've met has a level of an inability to sit still because you're timetabled from 7 a.m. till 9 p.m. every day, including the weekends, and almost to the person they have hypervigilance because they've had to be, there was no downtime. And it's still the case, even in an independent day school now, the kids might be there, they might be there 8, 9, 10 hours a day. This wraparound care because parents are working all the time. The kids are there from 7:45 till 6:45 at night. Then they got homework. It's like, oh, come on. At what point does a young person just get to sit there and process and do nothing and stare? It's not healthy. Just to more, more is not more, less is more.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's so much in there, right? I'm looking at the time. We don't have a lot of time left. You started talking about seen and heard. Do you
Yeah.
want to maybe expand a little bit on that work that you're doing there?
Yeah, cool. Thanks. Seen and Heard it's only a couple of years old. It came out of the boarding school healing work that I was doing. I realized that there was a big network of people who were starting to, there was people really writing about this for about 10 years, people like Nick Duffel and the late Joy Chevrin. Others, Piers Cross, my coach, was putting a lot of YouTube out there. So there was a movement. But because of my background in the corporate world and marketing and all that, I felt that I could be of service by putting like a front end on the movement, because there were lots of people who needed help to talk about this part of their life, the boarding school stuff and what it meant. But they were disparate. They were all over the place, and it was hard to connect. So Seen and Heard was born out of creating a front end. And what we did is we put services in place. So we have free online sharing groups, because the sharing circles that I went through were life-changing for me. As soon as you show up to somewhere where there's other people who understand your experience and you tell them the things you never told anyone, a part of you just lets go. That stuff is moved out of shadow and into awareness, and it starts to shift. So we've got the free online sharing groups. We have specialist therapists, a big directory on there. We do grant assisted funding. So lots and lots of people who had really, really difficult experiences at school and have never, they've never worked. They've been too ill emotionally, physically all their lives. And so we cover therapeutic costs to get them into things like EMDR or emotional freedom technique or see psychotherapists, etc. So that's a big part of what we do. That's adult services. And then we've recently launched Seen and Heard Schools, which is to go in to swim upstream to the schools now and go in and deliver really sort of cutting edge well-being and welfare projects. So could be staff training, pupil coaching, and we have a full school welfare and well-being stakeholder survey. So we survey the parents, the teachers, the young people, the students, etc., to find out, is this a happy, safe place to be? If not, where does it need work, etc. So a real kind of open, honest approach. So yeah, that's Seen and Heard. It's not for profit, and it's been a labor of love for myself and the two other founding directors, Toby and Andrew. There's trying to raise funds for a cause where people think this is therapy for toffs, which was something I was actually told once, it is heartbreaking, because these are people who suffered, some of them suffered the most unspeakable sort of child sexual abuse, and you're calling them toffs and othering them, and they therefore don't need help. That's just wrong. So yeah, that's seen and heard. But thank you for asking.
Great initiative, and we need to see more of that, right? I mean, David, do you have questions left?
I mean, one thing I did want to say, I mean, you sort of spoke about men's groups, and I inadvertently discovered, I think we're members of the same group, even though we've not been in meetings, but I've been going to Men Speak online quite a bit.
Oh, very good. Yeah, Kenny Mamarella de Cruz and Men Speak is an incredible organisation. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we had Kenny on the podcast, and that's sort of how I found out about the group. And yeah, as we mentioned before the podcast, I've had a bereavement this week, and so I've sort of spent a lot of time in the group this week. But yeah, it genuinely is like life changing, and yeah, obviously there is very much about confidentiality, but yeah, like it's so powerful when people share, and I think this is the, don't want to say silver lining to the cloud, but the yin to the yang is that when people have experienced pain but they can use it to help others, then that, well, it's just a very powerful thing.
I mean, post-traumatic growth is very, very real, and I hear far too much things like alcoholics, I'll be in recovery forever. Nope. Because it's a solution to a problem. If you solve the problem, you won't need the solution anymore. It is that simple. It's not easy. You have to do proper hard yards, but it is, we all have that functionality to do the work and heal what needs to be healed physically, emotionally. So yeah, but those group spaces. So I mean, for me, doing one-to-one work and doing group work and doing retreats, and then doing your own daily practice. If you haven't got a daily practice that involves some kind of getting in touch with your body, checking in with your inner world, breath work, meditation, anything like that, that's what we teach on the Compassionate Leader Pathway. Is just, you just can't function. The world is too stimulating, too overwhelming now to not find corners of space to properly human. Because you just get swept along with whatever's going on around you. Whereas actually what we try and preach is to be the calm in the center of the storm. So yeah, thank you for sharing, and my heart is with you and your family for your losses. It sounds really healthy that you're going to the group. So
thanks, Chris. So if people want to get in touch with you, find out more about Seen and Heard, what's the best way?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so www.seenheard.org.uk is the website. And then if you're looking for the schools one, it's seenheardschools.org.uk. There's I mentioned the Compassionate Leader Pathway, which is a 12-week online life leadership program which is brilliant, that I built with Piers Cross, my coach, and that's compassionateleadersglobal.com. So yeah, just get in touch, and I'd say most people I speak to go, I think my dad went to boarding school. I think someone I work with does it. That kind of what you're saying kind of makes me click. Yeah, he used to be a bit like this, or just come and have a look at it, because it's an interesting part of the journey. Yeah, and most importantly, as you said at the beginning, my vision, connection and compassion. So just finding ways in our lives to create connection and to breed compassion is life-changing.
Thanks very much, Chris.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing your story. That's very powerful.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Feel free to reach out to Volker or David via our website, www.manupdown.com, or podcast@manupdown.com, with any feedback or to let us know what topics you'd like us to cover in the future. Hear you again soon.